Glad to have you today. I did send out this invite probably only a week or two ago, so I'm glad for those that could join us here today. So just by introduction, my name is Paul Schmick. I'm the Vice President of Security Technology here at Alliance Security. And I want to really thank Panda today for hosting this demo that takes us through just the incredible work that Panda does in the cybersecurity domain. So I want to thank James Manning in advance, who will be taking us through today. James is a Senior Solutions Engineer with Panda, and looking forward to him taking us through this today. So again, James, thank you in advance. I just want to take a few minutes to discuss why we've decided to hold quarterly webinars with Panda, who has become our strategic partner. As we all know, cyber is constantly in the news. It seems daily at this point when you hear of breaches and hacks and the cost that it's devastating businesses, and some don't actually rebound in terms of their branding and the damage that it does. So while cybersecurity has always been just IT-centric, for those of us in the security technology world, it's become a priority over the last few years, and it feels like it becomes more and more a priority as the days and weeks go forward. And that's because security systems are tied into now building systems, enterprise systems, and information digital infrastructure of buildings. So it's incredibly important that we, as in that field, advance that discussion. So what Panda delivers for us as a reseller is really ease of use. We've had great success with deploying licensing through Panda, easy dashboard management, and navigational, I would say, architecture through the client portals that we do and can build for our clients. So it's truly been an incredible experience for us with Panda. Today, what you're going to hear about is adaptive defense technologies, which Panda is a true pioneer as being the first cloud-based offering. So what they offer is that ease of hardware. A lot of us are hardware-centric because of the systems we deploy, and as we know, more and more is going to cloud-based offerings in software as a service, platform as a service, and Panda offers us that. So that's why we're really excited about it, again, because of that ease of deployment and that ease of use. Our mission with Panda, being a leader, is to truly just protect our client networks, their NVRs, their information systems. Again, a lot of them that tie into those backbones. As we know, video is highly sought by those attempting to cripple information systems through DDoS attacks, which you can be part of a bot attack and not even know it, because that video is so rich in content. You can actually, because of the size of files, you can really cripple an information system with a DDoS attack. So we will be offering information sessions quarterly. For those that didn't join today, they will be getting a recording of this, which will allow them to catch up at their leisure. And also, again, we will be doing this quarterly with all our clients and introducing new things every quarter, so it won't be a repeat. So with all of that said, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to James Manning, who again is with Panda. And just to make a note that I was asked to mention, you'll not be able to be heard during this recording, but you could always put your questions in the chat box. So with that said, James, take it over. And again, thanks in advance for your efforts today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. As Paul said, my name is James Manning. I'm one of the pre-sales engineers here at Panda. And I'm going to be talking to you a little bit today about sort of trends we've seen in the industry. I think it's important to understand, and the Adaptive Defense 360. And all of that is geared sort of towards answering the question of why. You know, why should you even consider Adaptive Defense 360? The antivirus industry has been around for 25 years, probably more. So why invest in a new model, and why consider doing things a different way as opposed to the way they've always been done? So we want to hopefully answer that question today. So let's go ahead and get started with a little presentation here. We're going to focus on really two main areas to sort of illustrate why you want to consider this new model that we're offering. And the first one's going to be growth, and the next we're going to run through a look at eras. And we really want to pull out of this is some of the historical changes that we've seen in the industry itself from the malware side, and really sort of kind of develop some trends that are likely to carry through into the future and why you need to be concerned about those. So the first one is growth, and this is a big factor, and this is growth and malware. Since 2006, we've experienced periods of just drastic malware growth. I mean, exponential almost. And one key thing with this growth is that there's been a distinct lack of plateaus. So this is something that, you know, it's not where we have a year or two of steady growth and then it flattens out for a couple of years. This is something where growth has been consistent year over year over year. And another factor, and we'll see this a little bit more as we get into the eras, is that there has been growth in complexity in the malware. So it's not just simple stuff that's, you know, that's easy to detect, easy to get rid of. It's becoming more complex and more of a threat, more damaging to the data that you own. So there's an organization out there called AV Test. They do a broad spectrum of things, you know, software testing and things like that. They do a lot with malware geared tests. So they released some results that said there have been a dramatic increase in overall malware and new malware since 2012. And just in the past 3 years alone, there's been about 380 million new malware found. This kind of tracks with us. I think we're seeing somewhere around 227,000 new samples every single day. So, you know, why the exponential growth? What are some of the factors that we're looking at here? What's causing it? And we want to know about this because is this a trend that's also likely to continue? Or is it something that's periodical and it's just going to fizzle out? Well, unfortunately, it's financial motivation. The industry, as far as the malware and viruses are concerned, have really changed gears and they've moved towards financial reward more than anything else. Things called exploit kits and malware as a service have become available. And basically what you need to know about these is that they just make it very simple for almost anybody to go out there and infect machines with malware. Where used to, you had to have a little bit of skills of programming and exploitation and getting stuff delivered or pushed out through email. Now you got people out there doing it for you. All you have to do is have the money and the will to go out there and do so, and somebody's going to enable you. And there's been an increase in available infection vectors. In other words, in available ways that systems can get infected. Vulnerabilities are a big thing. You know, we start talking about vulnerabilities. These are weaknesses in programs that allow them to be used in ways that they're not designed to be used. They also have things like IoT, the Internet of Things. Everything is connected nowadays. But unfortunately, you know, security hasn't always kept up with that growth in technology, new devices, embedded devices, and things like that. So those tend to sort of be a relay into infecting other systems sometimes. And then things we call malvertising, and that's just advertising on the web that's used for malicious purposes. It may look completely legitimate, but in fact, it's designed to infect your systems. So a big growth in the areas and the ways that they can come after you and your data and your systems. So the next thing we want to kind of look at is the eras. And this is important. What we really want to illustrate here is the changes. So we've seen the growth. We've seen that there's a ton of malware out there. And the point there is that that growth can, that growth can really stress systems as far as being able to collect all that malware, process it, and getting it out and protecting customers in an efficient amount of time. So the first era, during this era, we saw very little samples, very few malware families. And a malware family is, you know, a couple of pieces of malware that have similar traits. So very few of those. Most of the viruses that we saw during this time were created for fun. People wanted to show off their skill sets. So they weren't designed to harm anybody's data or anything like that. They may have really been designed to illustrate a weakness in software or something along those lines. Back then, the internet wasn't what it is today, so propagation was very slow, sometimes taking months or years to move through systems. And all of the samples at this time were actually analyzed by technicians. There was very there was no automation. It was all very, very manual. As we move into the second era, we start to see a little bit of growth. So the volume starts to grow. One of the factors behind that is that the internet was growing more popular, and we started seeing mutations and things. So typical viruses started turning into macroviruses, mailworms, and things of that nature. They were still generally low complexity, but they started branching out in infection and propagation methods using things like social engineering through emails, tricking people through attachments or something like that. On our side, we start to adapt a little bit, and we create heuristic techniques. So we're not looking at a specific bad guy. We're looking at behaviors a bad guy may do and triggering on a file based on that. It's a way to go after a broader range of files without having to know about them ahead of time. And then we also started increasing our update frequency. As more and more samples, more and more detections come about, we wanted to get them out quicker. The third era, things really start to sort of heat up here. We start seeing massive worm activity. Mail-based worms like I Love You, exploit-based ones called Blaster, Sasser, and SQL Slammer. In our side, we start doing a little bit more on the proactive end of protection. We do some behavior analysis. So we look at the actions that a particular file engages in, and we try to trigger on that. We do things like behavior blocking, and that basically means no file is allowed to write to this file, or no file is allowed to access this resource on a system. Those are generally considered malicious activities. We also get into what we call machine learning. That's being able to analyze at a large scale actions that certain files and processes and things like that engage in. We also look at a little bit of identification to event analysis, and that means if you see a piece of malware or a executable file on a system go through and access a contact list in your email client, likely that's not going to be a legitimate action. So we want to maybe trigger on that and watch it a little bit more closely. That brings us into the fourth era. The fourth era is where we really start seeing an explosive growth. And as you see here, the main reason is that the hackers changed their focus. Economic benefit starts becoming the big thing. I like to think that really the precursor to this was things like adware. There was a period when spyware and adware became really big, and it really displayed the ability to monetize these attacks. So that started to move over into the general virus and malware arenas, and it just became the prime driving factor for infections. As we moved from things like adware, simple toolbars and stuff of that nature, the more complex guys start looking at things like bank Trojans and phishing attacks. We get a little bit of generalization in here. We have droppers, downloaders, and exploit kits. And what that means, a dropper, it exists solely to just get on a machine and pull the malware down. Typically, they're very small, they're disposable, so they're not something that you can reliably detect. On our side, we start moving into collective intelligence and big data. And basically, collective intelligence is what we like to call herd intelligence. We're using every protected Panda machine to share intelligence throughout the world. So if we see a suspicious file on one machine, we're going to share that knowledge with every other machine throughout the Panda universe. The big data, we started utilizing cloud environments like AWS and Azure and so on, collecting samples off of machines through that collective intelligence, and also applying the machine learning to that. It allows us to do a massive amount of file classification as opposed to just the manual one-by-one method. But also, it allowed us to start getting around the limitations of a signature file a little bit. Whereas before, that signature file, unless it's on the endpoint, they're not protected against a variant. But with collective intelligence, somebody could release a new variant today, and if one of our machines sees it and shares that intelligence, they can be protected against it before a signature file is actually delivered. As we see here, collective intelligence, knowledge delivery from the cloud as an alternative to signature files. And our big data. At the time of this, we had a current working set of 12 terabytes, 400K million registries, 600 gigabytes of samples every day, and I'm 99% sure all of these numbers have increased. And from there, we move into the fifth era. This is a little bit more towards the current era. There's the cause for concern a little bit in this era, at least from a personal perspective here. One of the things we see is nation states. These kind of attacks start to go mainstream. A while back, it was Estonia. Actually got attacked. I think their electoral grid got taken down. Countries like Iran and Vietnam also were attacked. We start to see more of the strain of activist groups like Anonymous. So they started targeting groups like the RIAA, which is the Recording Industry Artists Association, the MPAA, Motion Picture Association, SGAE, and ISIS. We all know who ISIS is, and others. We start seeing professionalization and malware. So marketing techniques and spam, but also, oddly enough, things like support services. Ransomware at its peak actually had people that you could call on the phone if you got infected, and they would help guide you through paying the ransom to get your data back. We started seeing additional things like country-based malware distribution. And what that means is, we saw some ransomware that it was launched from like Russia or the Ukraine. And one of the first things it did was check to see what country the infection was taking place in. And if it was in the Ukraine, it didn't infect the machine. It started going after other machines. The other thing is some of the screens that they would pop up to the user were based on whatever country they were in. Advanced persistent threats, and also detection by context. We're looking at the process and the content or the context of the execution. So we're trying to match side by side the advancements in the malware, but also the advancements in our technology in order to keep up and keep people protected. And I think the good point that illustrates here is, while we think that antivirus has been doing the same thing for about 25 years, the reality is it hasn't. There have been incremental steps along the way to try to combat these new advances in malware. So nation states are interesting. I wanted to illustrate this a little bit more because I said this is sort of a point of concern, at least for me. There's a good reason in here. Let's look at them. So in 2009, GhostNet. This was of Chinese origin. It affected 100 different countries, primarily their embassies and their ministries. And what it basically did is it turned the endpoints, or the desktops, the workstations, into remote listening devices. It essentially was able to turn on the microphones on those devices and listen to everything that was going on in those offices. The next one, Stuxnet, you may or may not be familiar with, was in 2010. It targeted Iran, and it attacked what were called primary logic controllers. These were devices that actually controlled the speed of centrifuges in their nuclear facilities. This was very, very, very complex in nature. And basically what it did was it caused damage to the centrifuges by making them spin faster than they were supposed to, and then they would shatter. And then the next one, a little bit more recent, is called Deep Panda. It's in 2015. Again, this was Chinese origin, highly sophisticated. These guys actually went after multiple countries. And if you heard about it in the news, this was actually the group or the attack that compromised 4 million records at the Office of Personnel Management for the U.S. So these nation states are out there. They're very active. And one of the concerning things is their resources, their skill, and everything like that's applied to these attacks is going to spill over for us. So it typically gets out into the wild, if you will, and your everyday run-of-the-mill hacker starts implementing them. We saw that with the recent WannaCry attacks. So also with that, successful campaigns will continue to increase in complexity. And the reason this is because, remember, we are working from financial motivation. So if they hit on something that actually generates a lot of revenue for them in regards to an attack, they're not just easily going to lay it down and walk off to something new. They're going to try to adapt and modify and adjust it to keep injecting life into it, keep getting revenue from it until they can't any longer. They're going to be more persistent as trends in the industry. And as I was just saying, the nation state innovations that we saw in some of these attacks are going to spill over and affect the private sector. Once you put out some of this advanced technology, these advanced attacks, you put them out into the public sector attacking a computer, somebody gets a hold of it, it's there and open and available for anybody that wants it at that point. So with all of that, we bring about adaptive defense, next generation endpoint protection. And from a high level, this is a new security model. It's completely different from what we've been doing industry-wide with traditional antivirus. We can guarantee the classification of 100% of the programs or processes that are running on the machine. Just to compare that with traditional antivirus, you're using that signature file, and essentially, it's just a blacklist of known bad actors. And that signature file says, I know these guys are bad, and if I see them, I'm going to get rid of them. But everything else, I'm going to consider completely legitimate, and I'm going to allow it to do whatever it wants. So there's a big gray area there. If we don't know that a file is bad, we can't do much about it, and it's allowed to infect your systems and run around and steal your data and affect it. Right now, and this was an earlier version of this presentation, it says we have 1.2 billion applications already classified. That's grown since this time as well. But along with the classification side of it, it's a full solution. So this is not something you're going to have to go out and buy this piece and that piece and another piece. It offers web filtering, remediation, which means we'll clean up the system, things like device control, and some other features that are in there as well. It can be a complete replacement for what you're doing now if you're looking for a more secure solution. So that being done, let's go ahead and take a look at adaptive defense. We are going to move through some of the key areas here in the console. Later on, you can work with Paul and myself, and we'll be happy to come back in, drill down on some of the other areas, and give you a little bit more of a robust look at the product. Let me draw a contrast here on the status page. This is what you're always going to see whenever you log into the console. I want you to take a look at the traditional way of doing things and the way that we're doing things today. Traditionally, when you have an antivirus detection, it's going to look something like this. When you click into it, it's usually going to be categorized in some way, you know, viruses, malware URLs, and so on. And about all the information that you're normally going to get from one of these detections is, hey, it was on this machine, this was its name, and this was where we found the file. And we went ahead and got rid of it for you. So that's it. Anymore, a lot of intelligence is needed, a lot of data is needed to really get a full picture of what these things are doing on your network, because you want to know what are the areas of my network are possibly going to be affected. What if my data is affected? Did they try to copy anything out or steal anything out? Did they interact with any of my other applications? And we achieve that with the adaptive defense alerts. So you can see from a high level here, overall, we let you know how many incidents have occurred. We could tell you if they accessed any of your data, and we monitor 200 different data file formats for that. We could tell you if they made external connections outside the network, and if they were run. When we drill down, you really start to see the difference in these alerts. We have one here. We expand this out, and you can see right off the bat how much more data that you get. So we have the path to the file. So we show you where that file was. We have something called a dwell time. And the dwell time is important because it basically represents how long was it there. This on our side represents the point from when it first entered the system until it was classified by our service. So you know how long it existed on that machine. We could tell you if it came from another computer as well. And then below that, we provide something called the malware lifecycle. This is essentially a full forensic breakdown. So if a file was permitted to run, you have that ability as an administrator to do so. But if it was permitted to run and ended up being malicious, we're not going to just tell you that we detected it in this folder or this location and that's it. We're going to tell you precisely what it did. So did it create your registry keys? What registry key did it create? We list that for you. Did it communicate with anybody internally or externally? We'll give you those IP addresses. Did it load any DLLs or run executables, other programs, anything of that nature? We list all that information for you. And we can tell you some of the minute details along with running those executables. What other commands did it pass to it? Is there anything valuable there for me to see? This is provided with each and every incident. But along with this, some people are better visual learners. So we provide the activity graph with each and every incident. And we color code it just simply because color coding sometimes helps it to be easier to extract key information out. So our red files are untrusted, so these are our bad guys. Trusted files are going to be green. Our orange files are simply files that weren't known about at the time. And then we also use orange for communication. So if it tries to talk to anybody inside the network or outside the network, if it tries to talk to somebody outside the network, we're going to go a step further. We're going to tell you what city that connection is in. We even give you XY coordinates. So as you can see with this alert or with this incident, we've got a broad picture of everything that's happened. We see every program that it touched, everybody that it connected to. We know where those connection points are in the world as well. Now, another neat thing that we can do here, this is not just a static image that we provide. We can go through the development of the malware lifecycle as it occurred in time. So we can essentially replay all these activities, every action step by step by step. And this is provided with each and every incident. Now, going back to the status page, this is going to really kind of illustrate the control that you have over the application. We don't kind of brute force our way into the network and say, look, we're locking everything down. You don't have a choice. No, we leave the choice in your hands. So right now, as we said before, we're doing process classification. So what does that mean? Well, whenever a program tries to run, we're going to ask a simple question. Do we know what this program is, yes or no? And if the answer is yes, we allow it to behave depending on what we know about it. So if we know it's bad, we don't let it run. If we know it's good, it's allowed to run. Pretty simple. Now, if we don't know what that file is, we prevent it from running until we do. Therefore, we eliminate that entire gray area that we were talking about earlier with signature files. So we may not know what it is, but we're going to go find out for you to make sure that you're secure. So in that process, when we come across something that is unknown and we're blocking it to go find out what it is, we're going to list all those files right here for you. We're going to tell you at every point in time, hey, we're looking at these 6 files to find out what they are for you. Now, if you come in here as an administrator and you know what they are, you say, all right, well, this file here I know for sure is legitimate. It's our own program. I just put it out there. Like I said, you have full control. You can come in here and say, don't block this again. And at that point, we take your lead and we say, okay, we let it go. We allow it to run. But we still do our work on our side. We're still going to go through the classification process just in case it wasn't what you thought it was. All right. And if it's malicious, it ends up becoming malware, we're going to lock it down for you. Now, beyond that, we start looking at sort of some of the organization and the management of the console. The screen we're looking at here, the computers tab, this basically just shows all the devices that we have Panda installed on. Very easy to come in and work with. We list all the devices in here by name. We give you 3 simple status columns to utilize, showing you the version, the signature file that they're on, or the knowledge that they're using, and the different modules. Is everything enabled, disabled, unavailable, or in an error state? So you can quickly come in and analyze that. After that, the installation. The installation is pretty painless. We really have 3 different ways of going about the install. So we can download a file directly from here. And our Windows file can be used with Active Directory if they want, or they could just put it on a thumb drive and go around machine to machine or something of that nature. But they can install directly from that file. Or let's say you have multiple locations and you have an administrator at a couple other sites. We can help you to format an email that includes a download link for that administrator. And they can go in and download the file and then use it to install at their location. And then the third option is what we call a distribution tool. This basically allows an administrator to sit at his desk and push the install out on the network based on different factors, such as an IP address or an IP range, or by using the domain. So really easy ways to distribute the product. Now, as we get into the settings, this is where we're going to control sort of the organization and the behavior of the devices protected by Panda. Organization is simple. We could just come in here and create folders. It's really easy to do so. We just come in and add the plus sign, give it a folder name if we want to. Or we can have it do things like sort of mimic our Active Directory structure or group itself together based on IP addresses. So we have a couple of options there. Create as many of these as you want or need. Now our profiles power the devices inside of those groups. And we can create as few of these as we need or as many as we want. We have some customers that they have really, sort of trouble users. They have their own group for that user and their own profile for that user. So if you want to use a group and a profile for a single person, feel free. So let's take a look at some of the key things sort of in this profile. The main one is the advanced protection settings here. And this, if anything, really illustrates how simple this service is to configure and to manage. First off, we look at the behaviors. The adaptive defense service is going to run in one of three behaviors at all times. There's an audit behavior in here, and it is just like it sounds. It's going to just monitor and record activity. It won't block anything for you. The next is a hardening behavior. The hardening behavior is our default behavior when we get on the network. This really sort of allows us to get introduced to the applications that you may have that we've never seen before. And it allows us to classify those applications without having a real impact on your end users. You don't want a lot of people calling you up saying, I've got stuff that's getting blocked and so on. So hardening is for that. Anything that's unknown to us that was already there before us gets allowed to run. But anything unknown to us that comes from the outside, we block that while we do classification. Then after time, we're going to transition into a real fully secure mode called lock behavior. In the lock behavior, anything that's unknown to us, regardless of where it's coming from, is going to get blocked while we do classification. Okay. So we're ramping up with hardening and going into full secure mode with our lock. Now, sometimes it causes a little bit of concern with people, but we give you some options with it as well. So you can report the blocking to the user. They'll just get a little pop-up letting them know that it's taken place. They won't be able to do anything with it. Or you can go a step further and report the blocking and give the user the option to run. So this was really designed for developers and people like that. Maybe if you got guys that are doing CAD and things of that nature, then this may be appropriate for them. Beyond that, we start getting into settings like anti-exploit, exclusions. If you want to prevent adaptive defense from looking at certain areas, you can do so. Network usage, you can control the amount of data that we use in an hour. And even privacy. In our alerts, by default, we use variables in some of the file paths just to protect your privacy, but you have full control over that as well. So you can come in and actually override that with two simple checkboxes. And then that's it from the adaptive defense side. It's really simple, but as we said, this is a full solution. So we have device control. If you want to make sure people aren't plugging in USBs that have viruses on them, this is ideal protection for that. You don't want people copying stuff off their mobile phone or to their mobile phone. We can protect you there as well. And then you also have a whitelist with this. So you could block an entire category while allowing specific devices through. And then one of the last features in here is actually our web access control. This is a good layered protection to have. This is what we call a category-based web filtering. It's not complicated. There's not a lot that you got to configure. Just think if you have remote users, or if you have somebody that comes into the office on a laptop, but they also take it home, and maybe they browse around and work, but they don't connect into your network while they do so. well, they could be exposed to some of the malicious threats that are out there on the web. With this, you can actually come in and set up a very specific schedule for people that are working from home or taking things home, to where the protection turns on the entire time that they're away from the office. And then once you set up schedules, if you choose to do so, we give you about 53 different categories of websites that you can restrict access to. So it's not something tedious that you have to come in here and say, block this website, block that website. You can just say, look, I know anything tasteless, I don't want my users seeing. They don't need to be worrying about that. Violence, they don't need to be looking at that while they're working. So you can block the entire category. So those are some of the options there. That covers largely the console. The one other thing we have is something called the Advanced Reporting Tool. This is sort of an additional piece that attaches onto Adaptive Defense. If you really want to get into some deep insight, we'll just hit some key areas here. It really brings a lot of intelligence out of your network and allows you to really, really see a big picture as far as what is going on. So just to give you an example of some of the things that we provide with the Advanced Reporting Tool, I won't get too far into it. We can show you things like the vendors of all the executed applications in the environment. So if somebody wants to be sure they know who is running in their environment, let's look through here. We may have somebody that's unknown, like this Lucky Tab. Don't know who that is. Well, this is the process name for it. Well, that looks completely random. We could drill down and see exactly where this file is running in our environment. We can also show them vulnerable applications, and these are important because vulnerable applications are often going to be used as a way to infect systems. So in our struggle to be able to keep applications, operating systems up to date, this is a big help in that process. We can come in easily and look and see, all right, well, I've got some Microsoft programs that are vulnerable. Word, for instance, looks like it's vulnerable, and I see that it's installed on all these machines. So very quickly we can come in and say, all right, well, I know I need to update Word on these machines. Really take some of the guesswork out of it and helps us out. Another thing we have, bandwidth consumption. This is a perennial topic in a network. Where's my data going? We can show data volume received and sent by your processes. So as we see here, Chrome has downloaded 1.36 gigs of data in 24 hours, and this is globally from the entire network. We can drill down and see, but looks like WinLaptop 4 is the largest chunk of that. So maybe we need to look at why WinLaptop 4 is downloading so much data in a 24-hour period. Then as we go beyond that, we have some additional things in here. Really gets into the nitty-gritty, if you will. We can show you all the country codes that have been accessed. So if you're sensitive to this sort of thing, this is going to be listed right here for you. But another neat thing that we provide is a world map that shows you the destinations of all of your outbound traffic. So if you know you shouldn't have connections going to a certain country, you can very easily come in here and look and see if that's the case. It's a heat map too. So as traffic at a specific endpoint increases, or the frequency increases, it goes from green to red. And what really gets neat about this part here is we can drill down, get all the way down into this endpoint, because a red dot on a map isn't going to tell us a whole lot. We might want to get a little bit of a closer look. This, as we're starting to already see, is an airfield out in California. But this is actually a federal airfield called Moffett. Well, this gray and black is great. It doesn't tell us a whole lot either. Maybe we need a little bit more info. Let's go into satellite view. We can drill down and see the destination of this endpoint connection. And this is something that, cross-referencing deeper analysis may allow us to get an idea of what's going on or where this connection is geographically. Then after that, we get into some basic things like user activity. We also have user activity. We can see which users are at specific endpoints in a given point in time. As we see here, we get into things like data file access. So if you're concerned about specific data files on your network, We can tell you when those files are accessed and by whom. And then all of this information we can set up alerts on, customize them for you. They can be delivered through email and a couple of other ways. And that is largely what I have for the product. I hope you'll see, I mean, this kind of tracks historically with advances in the sort of the security industry, the antivirus industry, in an attempt to get ahead of the curve and, you know, in front of the game as far as malware. And we really believe that we've kind of hit on it here with this new model. Instead of adding little band-aids and patches to the old way of doing things, this is a brand new approach. This is a solid approach. I've been in the industry myself for about 12, 13 years. So this is something that's always been talked about, but never really done. So I'm kind of excited about this myself. So what we'll go ahead and do now is we will open up the floor for questions. As Paul told you, you're not going to be able to converse with us through voice. So we have a little question box down there. You can type any questions that you may have in there, and we'll get those answered. So John asked, does the Android installation client meant for phones and tablets? You can do it on tablets. Chromebooks, no, but phones, yes. And anybody else, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in there. All right, so we have another question that says, how much bandwidth does your product consume while in operation? It's anywhere from 100K to 1 meg per endpoint per day. Now, that's going to vary because as you saw with some of the modes that are there, we have that hardening behavior or mode, and the whole idea of that is to get to know unknown applications. So naturally during this phase, there's going to be increased activity, increased bandwidth usage. Once that happens, once we get through the classification of all your apps, it's going to go down towards the 100K side. It'll be very small usage. And then, of course, if you introduce wide scale any new applications or anything like that, you may see a little bit of a spike during that time as well. The second side of this question that I'll go ahead and answer now is resource usage. A lot of people look and say, man, you're looking at all these characteristics. You're classifying all these files, you're watching all this stuff, you've got to be just a resource hog. And actually we're not. We use anywhere from 2 to 5% of resources on the machine with Adaptive Defense 360. So it's sort of been a hallmark of the Panda products. They've really kind of strive to make sure that these things are low resource usage applications. And I think they've done pretty well with that.
James, I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second and remind people that we did record this webinar. So if you had to step out or if you have somebody else in your office that wants to be able to listen, we will make it available to you.
All right, James. So I believe that's it in the questions. Do you see any other questions in the box?
No, I think that's going to do it, probably.
Okay, great. So I again want to thank all that could join today. As you can see, that the power of the platform is just really incredible and really forward-leaning. So as Sharon did just mention, we will be sending this out. So if you know those that could not attend due to scheduling conflict, just assure them that we will, in the next day or so, be getting out a recorded version of this. I again want to thank Panda so much for this effort. Took a while just to put it together and make sure we scheduled it and get it out to those of you that were able to join. So again, Sharon and James, thank you so much for your efforts. And we will be doing this quarterly, as I talked about earlier, so you can look for the next one in December. We'll be scheduling probably the first week or two of December. So again, thanks everybody that could join, and have a great day. Take care.